They were out early one morning, panning in the stream for gold, surrounded by the rising mountains. Old prospector with a tale for two, he brushed around in the pan, and pointing out what lay within was ordinary sand. He began with his story about 20 years before, and the younger man who sought his fortune. With a tear or two he told of searching for his treasure, but making known the gold he sought was ordinary pleasure. There were years of doing without, and there were years of plenty. I started thinking that life was never steady, excepting when the bills came in and I had no money to pay. Whiskey had never tasted better ordinarily. Concluded his story as it filled the air with a laugh, saying how he found the Lord and Savior, and how he found the river of life by which his day unfolds, and pointing out what stands within is not ordinary gold, and pointing out what stands within is not ordinary gold. Trust in God, believe upon His promises. Through His word we can see His wonders, signs and miracles of His love. We can return His love with devotion, standing on His word before all men. We are His beloved and His chosen, walking in this life renewed with peace. Trust in God, believe upon His promises. upon His promises. Through His Word, we can see His wonders, signs and miracles of His love.
All right. I'm Mark Wallace. This is True North Studio, and today the topic is fighting for our true identity. Now, identity is a crazy mixed up topic in today's world, and it wasn't much different during Jesus' day. Jesus needed to show His apostles how to fight for their newfound identity and not just give in to whatever duality that lives just below the surface. Jesus was sending His men into a real-life battle against themselves, their old selves, their old identities. They were about to experience the closest thing to His wilderness temptations that Jesus could expose them to. Only this would be done in a group and in a semi-controlled environment. When we go through this section in Matthew 16, we're going to learn a lesson about fighting for our God-given ability. We're going to learn about failure and about getting back up. We'll also see that power lurks in the shadows, and a power lurks in the shadows who wants nothing more than to bring out our worst. So it's kind of important to bring out the best in ourselves, because God knows we're going to face the same thing the apostles did, especially if we live at a high level. Jesus was a master teacher and would go to any extreme to help His new apostles grow past their weaknesses. Like trying to carry a cat by its tail, the apostles were about to learn a lesson they couldn't learn any other way. Location, location, location. Yes, it was lush and beautiful. Yes, people from all over the world came to visit this place. Yes, the place was special, felt special, but Jesus was not taking His followers on a relaxing getaway. Jesus did not bring His disciples to this very specific, almost festive location to sightsee, eat corn dogs, and gelato. He was setting them up for a life lesson they would never forget. This was for keeps. Like I said a second ago, they were about to experience their own version of the temptations, only they would not have to deal with the devil himself like the Christ did. They would have to deal with something earthier, something we all have to deal with. Jesus took them all the way up to the northern border of Israel, to the crossroads of the eastern Mediterranean trade routes, in the beginning of the road to Damascus. Yes, it was the same road made famous by the Apostle Paul's crazy, life-changing spiritual experience. Matthew 16:13. And when Jesus came into the coast of Caesarea Philippi, He asked His disciples, saying, "Whom do men say I, the Son of Man, am?" Now, before we get into Jesus' big question here, I want to point out that Jesus confidently calls Himself, I, the Son of Man, both at the beginning and the end of this lesson. The term I, the Son of Man, where it has the word the in it, the Son of Man, always refers back to Adam, the first human with body, soul, and with the addition of spirit. That phrase always signifies Adam's dominion over the earth because of the Spirit of God. The words I, the Son of Man, is also a label, a tag, a self-brand, and I'm going to explain this later. Now, I don't believe that Christ was asking His disciples who people thought He was out of curiosity or insecurity or was in need of being built up by His disciples. I believe Jesus was setting His disciples up for a lesson on fighting for their own identity, their own brand, and oh, what a lesson they were about to get. Plus, what were they doing all the way up in the resort area of beautiful Caesarea Philippi, a marathon's distance from Galilee? Didn't Jesus know this was a bustling crossroads of cultures and beliefs? Didn't Jesus know that what the locals called Panias was a hub of spiritualism and magic? Didn't He know that people came to that very spot from all over the world, all over the known world, for one of two reasons? One, to ask the local spirits to break down their opponents, and two, to get help breaking down sexual barriers. Didn't Jesus know that there were huge marble temples erected next to ancient grottos, carved into primeval mountains to seek favor from one of the oldest of the Greek gods, a god named Pan? You know, this place and whatever spirits ran it had been operating there for thousands of years. People from all over the world believed Paneas held some special kind of power. It even uses, it was once even used for child sacrifice during the Baal worship days, many hundreds of years before that. All day and all night, power was sought, begged, summoned at this place, and it was usually quickly rewarded. Jesus needed his disciples to see how they would respond when their identity was challenged by unseen forces. And again, why this field trip? Why this place? And why all the questions? The identity question. Identity is such a popular yet divisive topic today. We have both a given identity and a chosen identity. One was given to you at birth and in your formative years, your family, your race, your religion, your early education, where you were raised, your stunning good looks. The other is our chosen identity. And, it's who you choose to be as an adult. You choose where you're going to live, your friends, your spouse, your profession, your habits, and you should carefully choose the words that come out of your mouth or that you put into your text or post. Jesus asked the apostles who people said he was, and they answered Jesus honestly. Verse 13 continued, "Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? And they said, some say that you're John the Baptist, some Elijah or Elias, others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." See, different disciples began to speak off and rattle things they had heard other people say about Jesus. It was not necessarily who the apostles believed Jesus to be, it was just what they heard people say. For example, some people said Jesus was the reincarnation of his older cousin John the Baptist, who was just recently murdered. And maybe there was even a family resemblance. Others were saying he is the re-embodiment of Elijah or Jeremiah, or maybe the reawakening of one of the older prophets. It's sort of like saying he plays the guitar like the reincarnation of Jimi Hendrix, or she plays tennis with the spirit of Serena, or that boy dribbles the ball like he's the rebirth of Messi. Mind you, none of this kind of talk was biblical. None of this was taught in Hebrew school, but it was how regular people talked. Jesus had become part of popular conversation. Today, people would have been posting memes about him. We'll see in a minute why Jesus asked this next loaded question. Verse 15, "And he said unto them, But whom say ye that I am? Who do you say that I am?" Well, now Peter, always aggressive, speaks first. Ooh. Verse 16. And Simon Peter answered and said, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." Peter said what he truly believed. He totally believed Jesus was the actual Christ in the flesh. He was not like the Christ. He was the Christ. This is not who people thought Jesus was back then. They thought he was like the Christ. He was Christ-like. Nobody yet believed that he was the Christ except Peter. Verse 17, "And when Jesus answered and said to him, Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven." Jesus had given Simon a nickname, Peter, a few months back. But here he calls Peter by his given name, Simon Bar-Jonah, or Simon the son of Jonah. That was his dad's name. Now, Jesus told Peter that what he just said was new light. It was a new thought amongst the apostles. It showed Peter that he had been thinking about this Christ thing a lot. Now, Peter, what you just said didn't come from your own thoughts or from what any other person's been talking about. Nobody on earth has been talking this way. Nobody in Israel thought Jesus was the Christ, not even all the apostles, yet. Heck, even Jesus' own brothers didn't even believe he was actually the Christ. Even John the Baptist, a few weeks ago, wondered if it was true that Jesus was the Christ. Jesus said, Peter, my Father in heaven revealed to you by revelation that I am the Christ. You tapped into the Spirit of God, Peter. Good work. Peter was feeling pretty good about himself about now, wouldn't you? If the Christ complimented you like that? But what usually happens when things seem to be going a little bit too good? Sometimes the wheels fall off, don't they? The twist. Now comes the test that Jesus brought them all here to take. It's a bit of a twist. Jesus wants Peter to see what he's really made of. Wants them to all see how deep their roots go in this Jesus being Christ thing. Now Jesus starts calling Simon by his nickname, Peter. And he defines the name. And I say unto thee, verse 18, and I say unto thee, thou art Peter. Now, Jesus' moniker for Simon was Peter. And in Greek, it means a rock. But it means a rock that can be moved, or thrown. Peter was a hard guy, but he was still human. And we're going to see that Peter is taken a little bit aback. But upon this rock, Jesus tapped in his own chest, I will build my church. Peter, you're a rock. You're one tough hombre, but I am the entire foundation. I am totally unmovable. And Peter was like, what? The King James English makes it sound like Jesus is telling Peter that Peter, will be the person the entire church is built on. And you're going to see in a second that this is far from the case. Jesus said this in front of everyone. Peter thought of himself as the leader of these men. And this is a little bit of an ego hit for Peter. Watch this, verse 18 continued, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Now this is against the church that Jesus is going to establish. The gates of hell is an interesting choice of words here. The word hell simply means the grave, the long nap, pushing up daisies, the place of the dead. The gates of hell is also what some Bible scholars call the bottomless pit just inside Pan's cave. They believe Peneus to be the exact location that the spirits of the underworld would enter and exit. Like I said, Jesus uses a very specific choice of words. Jesus is saying that neither death nor whatever dwells in that cave or comes out of that cave will be able to overpower him or his church. Now remember that Peneus, or the house of Pan, is just over his shoulder. This is the only place on earth people could bring someone and their barriers just dropped and their weakest nature was exposed. There was something about this place. You could feel its pull to let out the old you, the wild you, the you that you've kept tamped down, and for good reason. You've all felt that pull in a place or in a person or a poem or a song. There's a reason. Jesus knew that the things that went on there, the apostles were either going to get thumped or they were going to get strong, or both. The point of indecision is where Pan works his magic. Jesus exposes Peter's ego in a place that will usually release the kraken. Let's see if Peter bites. Verse 19. And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whosoever shall bind on earth, and whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Now Jesus is talking to the entire group, and it's talking about the spiritual power that he will give, one that functions both in heaven and on earth at the same time. He says that heaven will mirror our moves. We grab, heaven grabs. We set something free, heaven sets it free. This, could this even be talking about spiritual deliverance? I think it could. What does this really mean to us? Are we more powerful than we think we are? You know, this is not a small deal. This is part of our true identity, our new identity. You are more than the sum of all your parts, your experiences, your family, even your failures. You are pretty special. Matthew 16:20. Then charged he his disciples that they should tell no man that he was the Christ. He just praised Peter for saying that he was the Christ. Now Jesus tells all the listeners, including Peter, not to tell anyone that he was the Christ. Peter scratched his head with his thick fingers. What? Wasn't that the question Jesus kicked this whole teaching off with? Jesus slows the conversation down a bit. Now he wants the reality of his words to have a moment to sink in. What he said next is not what they wanted to hear. Verse 21. From that time forth, Jesus began to show or to point out or to explain unto his disciples how that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed and be raised again the third day. Well, they're now over halfway through his ministry. Jesus really has to drive home the point that when he gets to Jerusalem, he will suffer at the hands of the religious leaders, he will be killed, and he will be raised from the dead 3 days later. Problem is, this is not easy to hear, but it was necessary to teach. Why? Because we know now that the day of Pentecost and the new birth depends on the apostles believing that Jesus rose from the dead. All they heard, though, was that Jesus was going to die a horrible death. But they didn't want to believe it. Now watch what happens. Peter's about to tap into another type of spiritual power. Hey, Peter meant well. Verse 22. Then Peter took him, grabbed Jesus by force, and began to rebuke him. That means forbid him from talking, saying, "Be it far from thee, Lord, that this abso-freaking-lutely will not, is not going to happen unto you. It's just not going to happen." Peter stands up, actually manhandled Jesus right in front of the group, and then drags him out of the circle where he had been teaching. Peter begins to rebuke Jesus. Rebuke Jesus. That means he forced him to shut up. Imagine Simon Peter holding his calloused fisherman hands over Jesus' mouth. This dominance and strength was part of Peter's old identity, his old man. It had its place. It worked well on the fishing boat, in a storm, but not here, not now, not during this teaching. While restraining Jesus, Peter yells at him, "You're not going to be captured, and you're not going to die. I will not let it happen, not on my watch." Now remember where they are? I told you earlier that they're sitting not too far from the temples built for the Greek god Pan. The entire area is called Panaeus, after Pan. It's so steeped in spiritualism that the locals believe it, excuse the modern expression, is the highway to hell. Have you ever gone somewhere and met someone that made you squirm? Made the hair on your neck stand up? Caused a reaction in you? It just felt dangerous to be there? Or have you ever been around a person that made you drop your guard? Got you to say things that were better left unsaid? Got you to do things you wouldn't normally do? No. Panaeus is where people go to summon this spirit named Pan. People from all over the world would come there to summon up Pan to help them uncover weakness in their enemy or help them to have incredible sex. Both take going back to one's primal nature. Jesus knew this. Basically, they call on Pan to expose the weak spots that reside within all humans. Did you know that the word panic comes from Pan? Pan causes confusion, panic, and cause people to make bad decisions. He is the earthiest of all the Greek gods. We'll call them spirits. Did you know that the mischievous character of Peter Pan was patterned after this spirit named Pan? I think it's funny how both Peter and Pan are used in his name. There is even a Peter Pan syndrome in psychology. It's when people never want to grow up, never want to take on responsibility, where they keep themselves trapped in a perpetual childhood. And why am I telling you all this about Pan? Well, read the next verse. Let's read the next verse, verse 23. But he turned and said unto Peter, Get thee behind me, Satan. Thou art an offense unto me, for thou savorest not the things that be of God, but those that be of men. Now, the Gospel of Mark adds that Jesus turned his back on Peter and spoke while looking at his disciples in that circle. Jesus shrugged out of Peter's powerful grip, turned his back on Peter, then spoke. He spoke past Peter. He spoke to whatever spirits had manipulated Simon to act like that. Jesus is speaking directly to similar spirits that he did during his temptation 6 or so months ago. Pan may have been one of them. Now you know. Pan was one of the oldest and deepest rooted spirits in Greek and pagan culture. It had been around for a long, long time and had gone by different names, different name changes. The apostles, who watching this whole thing play out, were frozen in blunt stupefaction. Their mouths were wide open. Imagine if you saw that go down. Peter looked hollow. The blood drained from his face. He slunk to his knees. He had just allowed himself to get manhandled by Pan, and he knew it. He knew it. Remember, the devil tried the same trick to get Jesus off his game, tried to break down his morals, his logic, tried to confuse his decision-making process, confuse the word in his heart. But Jesus withstood the devil because the word in his heart was deeper than the temptation. Jesus saw Pan coming a mile away. If you can think back to that time you allowed your baser instincts to rule when you knew better, you will probably catch a fleeting glimpse of Pan, smirking and gone. This is still part of the lesson on identity. Any of you who have ever had to deal with spiritual problems in yourself or in others, know that you address the spirit and not the host. You must take a frontal assault when it comes to devil spirits. You can't pussyfoot. Example, one freezing wintry night, a van Josephine and I were riding and broke down, and we had to hitch a ride home. And we were maybe 45 minutes away. It was cold, crazy cold. A driver in a hopped up 66 blue Chevy slowed down to check us out. Well, we climbed in, totally enjoying the heater on full blast. Well, after a bit of small talk, I started talking about the Bible, the Word of God. And the driver, cigarette in hand, acted lame, like he knew nothing about the Bible, until I mentioned the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ. Then, like a scene from a low-budget horror movie, the man leaned his head back and shouted in a deep guttural voice, "I was there." I said, "Excuse me? What did you say?" He repeated, "I was there at the crucifixion." And he laughed a demented laugh. Well, the ride just got interesting. He immediately jammed the gas pedal to the floor, and the car began to fishtail all over the frozen road. You know, we were swerving all over the ice. It was scary as hell. Then he leaned his head back, and with that same demonic laugh, he said, "Ha ha 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 ha! I'm having quite an introduction, aren't I?" Well, now that just pissed me off. And I had allowed this to go on way too long. I commanded the Spirit to slow down and drive safe, and it did. Then I made the guy sing some common children's Bible songs with us. And you know what he did? He did it! And by the time he got us to the front door of our place, he was crying like a baby. The man knew he was delivered. He even stayed in touch with us for a while. Jesus had pointed out that Peter tapped directly into the Spirit of God back in verse 17. And now, less than a minute later, Peter opens up to a spirit that wants to shut down the Christ and cause confusion amongst the ranks of the disciples. Now, don't be too hard on old Peter. We've all gone through this stuff. You know, this week I think I went through this whole teaching on my own. You know, years later, the Apostle Paul described this internal battle we all face. Romans 7:15 from the NLT. I don't really understand myself, for I want to do what is right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. You ever felt like that? Peter's brutish physical strength and desire for Christ not to discuss his death caused confusion in the disciples. This was a setup by the devil, by Pan, to force Jesus to shut up and stop talking about a truth that will eventually get people born again. Peter wanted Jesus to preach a more pleasant, happy gospel. So did Satan. So did Satan. We see this same compromise in many of our mega churches of today. It's sort of a spiritual elevator music that they speak. Sure, that happy gospel has its place, but that's not at the expense of taking a stand. If you've ever been deeply involved in a struggling ministry, you will have seen Pan pop in for a visit every now and again. You don't believe me? Don't believe me? When you see dissension amongst the leaders, when you see an uptick in sexual immorality in your church, you have seen the handiwork of Pan. He is always summoned by the person who's going in for the power grab, and they don't even know that they called for him. I use religion here as an example because politics is just way too easy for this teaching. All this would have been shocking for the disciples and for Peter to hear. How can you go from Jesus telling you that you just tapped into God, verse 17, that he would give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, verse 19, and then open it up to the spirit of Pan, verse 23? When I was a kid, I sat with my mouth wide open in awe as a group of 6 preteens at a family gathering all put their hands on top of a table and commanded it to rise in the air. I watched in wonder as the table floated in the air. I even leaned over and looked under the table to see if there was something, if they were doing something. Well, the kids doing it were in shock too. None of them were trained spiritualists. Some adult in the living room had just casually told them that they could ask the table to rise by itself, and if they asked it to rise, it was going to rise. So then they got that table to rise, and then they tried that same trick on a cousin, and she floated in the air. Now that's some weird stuff to see for a red-headed, freckled-faced kid with a buzz cut and hone-rimmed glasses, let me tell you. If you can tap into a spirit that easily, how much easier would it be to reconnect or to connect with and manifest the Spirit of God? It's got to be easier. Our chosen identity, our new identity in Christ must override our old man nature, or we will get manipulated. None of us are immune from spiritual attacks. We're all flawed people. But the more of the Word we know and believe, the more keys to heaven we're going to begin to use. The answer. Now Jesus switches gears, and he's now going to teach them all how to deal with this duplistic dilemma we call humanity. His apostles, especially Peter, just got played. Jesus was there to guide him and them back. Now here's a few keys on handling a lot of our troubles. Jesus put him in this situation. Now he's going to teach them how to get out of it so they never have to go in it again. Matthew 16:24. Then said Jesus unto his disciples, if any man will or intends to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Let's break this verse down a bit. It's loaded. First, deny yourself. So what part of yourself do you need to deny? We all have it. And which side do you want to highlight? You know that too. Next, take up your cross. Look, if you're willing to die for a cause, or for a person, or for a way of life, then you probably believe in it. Every one of those criminals that was crucified believed in why they did what they did, or they wouldn't have done it. That's their cross. And finally, follow the Christ. The apostles all knew exactly why Jesus used the term, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. After all, their moms and grandmas had taught them that lesson their whole lives. Since the Romans had invaded Israel and took over to establish Roman law and order, they began to crucify criminals. On each bloody cross or post, just above the head of the condemned, was a sign that summarized why they were put to death. On their log, their post, was a sign, a label that summarized who they had become: career thief, deadly murderer, evildoer, incited violence against Rome. The essence of their miserable life was boiled down to one short sentence for all to see. The Romans put that sign up there for a reason, for intimidation. You mess with the law, you die. And your sign tells the world what you were willing to die for. The apostles all understood Jesus' reference. Their moms and aunts had pointed out those signs above the heads of the condemned their whole lives. Think it like this. Look at that sad, sad man, Mark. If you keep stealing, you're going to end up just like him, nailed up on a post with a sign over your head for all to read. How embarrassing to the family. Such a shame. You want to waste your life like they did? Then with a wry, red-headed smirk, Mark might say, "Come on, Mom, I'll never get caught like that fool." Followed by a slap to the back of my head. All the apostles knew exactly what Jesus meant. We live and die by the choices we make and the words that we speak. And why not put off your old man, your baser worldly self, and write a new chapter in your life by following the Christ? The words on your sign, your cross, and you have one, will change as you change. What words will be used to summarize your life? Josephine, teller of stories and friend to all. Maureen, untarnished halo. Tara, a friend, loving but tough. And anyone who was ever in the U.S. Marine Corps would simply have the words Semper Fi on their sign, along with a USMC sticker. My sign, Mark's sign, might say, sort of a good teacher, an encourager of all. But what's on your sign? Our cross, our sign would start off by having two messages describing our two natures. But the more we follow the Christ, only one will really shine. Only one will be highlighted. Verse 25, "For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it." What are you willing to die for? Booze? Food? Adultery? Politics? A job? A sport? Your country? Your children? The Word? The Christ? Hey, we leave it all out on the field, folks. Remember where they are. Paneas. Remember what just happened to Peter. Think Pan. Jesus is still driving home his point. Verse 26, "For what is a man profited if he gain the whole world and shall lose or damage or injure his own soul, his essence? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul?" This is a two-part question by Jesus, which means this will be on the test. It's always on the test. What is a man profited if he will gain the whole world and lose or damage his own soul? And what shall a man give in exchange or in ransom for his soul, his life force? Now we see the first question play out in living color in the lives of most child actors. They lose their true essence. They lose their way for a bit. They lose a piece of who they really were, trying to live up to everyone else's expectations. It's hard as hell to get your soul back, but you can. Sometimes it can take a lifetime of therapy or a job change. Sometimes it just takes helping other people. The second question is a little more guttural. What are you willing to give up, to get what you want? What are you willing to exchange to get your soul back? There's always a price. There's always a price. The ransom is usually pretty high. Here's another example. When Joseph and I were newlyweds, we once attended an exceptional get-rich-quick seminar. During this man's masterful presentation, he said that we could all make money hand over fist in no time at all if we would just join his team and sell his stuff. And man, oh man, like a cartoon character, I had dollar signs in my eyes. I could see myself doing it. I was like a panting dog. He made it sound so doggone exciting and easy to make money and get rich. This had to be the greatest business opportunity of a lifetime. Immediately after the presentation, before we could shake hands with that amazing speaker, the presenter's well-dressed wife pulled Josephine and I aside from the crowd. She asked us to step aside. She had heard that we were young ministers heading off to Bible college. She also recognized that all too familiar slap-happy, glazed, dog-in-heat look in my eyes. She and all her expensive jewelry looked me right in the eyes, poked her fingers in my chest, and said, "My husband used to be a wonderful pastor until we got involved in this business." Then she said, "What's the real profit if you gain the whole world, but you lose your soul?" And then she turned and walked away, and so did we. The lovely wife of the rich guy saw something in me that shouldn't be there and slapped me out of it. She helped me save my injured soul that day. Look, if we happen to sell out to the world for a while, for a business, a ministry, a love affair, how much more work is it going to take to get our soul, our heart, our true essence back? You know, you can't lose your spirit. You can't lose your connection with God, but we can lose our heart and soul. Like I said, the word lose in lose your soul actually means to damage or to injure. We can damage our essence. We can injure our souls, our reputation, our name, our identity, our sign. Your heart is unique to you, and it's what makes you irreplaceable. Peter's son probably said, "Falls hard, but gets back up." Just because Peter lost a round with Satan, just because he got beat down pretty good that day, he still got back up and kept going. You know, like I heard my grown son say the other day while being tempted by his favorite snack, "Not today, Satan." Jesus, closing out the lesson, takes it to another level. Verse 27, "For the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he shall reward every man according to his works," or his practice. And this verse is as telling as it is mind-blowing. The word works should be translated practice. All of those hours in the gym pay off in the ring, on the court, on the field. We all understand the benefits of practice. Here's a quote. "What comes easy doesn't last. What lasts doesn't come easy." Unknown. All future rewards are given to people who've controlled their soul, harnessed their life force, and heightened their abilities. What are you willing to live for? And what are you willing to die for? Is your cross, your sign, your essence. God knows we'll all make mistakes. It's getting back up, dusting off, and getting back in the game, our game of life that matters. Peter sure got back up. 6 days later, Jesus asked Peter to go with him and 2 others higher up that same mountain above Peneus, where something amazing would happen. They call it the Mount of Transfiguration. Yes, Peter once again shot his mouth off in front of God and everybody. It's hard to believe. This time the voice of God boomed out of a glowing cloud and told Peter, "Stop talking and start listening to the Christ." Once again, he was reproved, this time by the voice of God, but he listened. Peter went on to write 2 books of the Bible, and for many years he was a strong leader of all the new Christian churches. Rewards or prizes are for those who work hard to bring out their true identity by keeping themselves in harmony with the Word and with the Spirit of God and getting back up. Paul called this personal growth thing the renewed mind. Renewing the mind is always building ourselves up to a higher level, a stronger level. You're always working to make yourself better, stronger, your words better, your songs better, your relationships better. After all that excitement, Jesus closes out his teaching and when he saw the disciples squirming just a little bit too much. Verse 28, verily I say unto you, there be some standing here, which shall not taste of death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. What does that mean? Jesus opens and closes this teaching moment by once again calling himself the Son of Man, which is telling, significant, and kind of important. The Son of Man was his label, his sign, his cross to bear. The word Son of Man always indicate the dominating power of God. It's God's power manifest on this earth, and it can happen right now, today, to you. To see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom must mean we can experience the power of the living Christ. We can experience our true identity right here, right now, on this crazy planet we call Earth. We can experience the Christ in us. Whatever you're willing to live and die for is your cross. Now all we need to do is keep following the Christ. How much different would you be in 6 months if you hung out all day long, every day with the Christ? Well, actually you can, and you do. Living out who you are for all to see is the lesson. We all still have that dual nature to contend with. We all, we're gonna keep getting thumped at times, but we keep getting up. And like Peter, we keep failing forward. Do you think that experience changed Peter? You bet it did. What about when Paul met the ascended Christ on that road to Damascus, not far from Peneus? You think he was changed by that? Oh yeah. We all have those seminal moments that change us for the better. What you allow is what will be written on your sign. What you do with your few moments on earth is your cross. Now that we've been reminded of our true identity, let's never allow ourselves to be talked out of it again. At least, let's try. You are equal to any challenge or problem or spirit because of your true identity in Christ. Like trying to carry a cat by its tail, the apostles learned a lesson they couldn't learn any other way. That true identity is the only part of you that will live long into eternity. The world needs the you that you're willing to live and die for. Let's keep fighting for our true identity. I love you. God bless.